Hello, everybody, and welcome to the fifth episode of the BadMotoGP-Show. After a little bit of discussing the UFC fights, we finally made it to the recording part. If you haven't checked it out, I can totally recommend it to you. A lot of violence going on there. We love to see it. But to the main talking point, the Circuit of the Americas hosted the race. Keelin, you enjoyed them.
Oh, who didn't, Leo? Who did not? Ladies and gentlemen, we have gone from Argentina to the land of God, guns, and George Bush, and we're back once again. Great weekend. Thank God that track is a lot better than it was last time. And yeah, we had another great weekend of packed action, Leo. Did we not?
Yes, and Enea Bastianini, he came in clutch again at the end of the race. And I'm very, very happy, first of all, for the Gresini family and for Ducati for having a little bit of success. But imagine you're in charge of Ducati and you're having to explain to Audi how a GP21 is so much better than a GP22. I mean, Enea Bastianini at the end of races, he is amazing, and he pretty much did what Suzuki needs to do, or Ai Ogura needs to do. He qualified good, had a good start, and then at the end of the race, he played his cards perfectly. So I'm very, very happy for him, and it was a true masterclass.
Yeah, brilliant performance from Enea Bastianini once again. You know, remnants of the Qatar performance at the opening of the season. I agree with what you've just said there, Leo. You know, Enea Bastianini's race pace takes care of itself. It's his qualifying and his weekend form that, as long as he can tailor that, he will go on to win many, many, many more races if he can nail those things down. As for the race itself, I don't need to talk too much about it because, like you said, you used the perfect word. It was a masterclass of a race from Enea Bastianini. That GP21 is just tailored to him and his riding style, and he's exploiting it perfectly. So, congratulations to Enea Bastianini and the Grassini family. I mean, that this is two more wins this season than I'm sure they ever dreamed they would get. They are living the dream right now.
Yes, and I'm also very, very happy for Jack Miller. He got the podium he deserves. It was much needed. And the same old issue with the rear tire preservation stopped him a little bit, but not as bad as in the past. So you can't blame somebody for losing out to Enea Bastianini and Alex Rins at the end of a race. And he did really good. He was the best GP22. That says a lot. And yeah, he needed this one because it was looking bad for him after the first three races.
Yeah, great performance from Jack Miller, like you just said. I mean, if it wasn't for Jorge Martin, he'd have started on pole, absolutely blitzed the qualifying in Q2. And like I just said, if Jorge Martin was not there, Jack Miller would have been a couple of hundredths of a second ahead of everybody else quite easily. Had amazing qualifying, had a very good weekend overall as well. Was much more like the old Jack Miller that we know and love compared to the first few races of this season so far. Like you said, had a brilliant race, led most of it on the GP22. Definitely was the best performing GP22 of the weekend. And like you said, if it weren't for rear tire issues, he could have gone on to win as well. It's just that age old issue rearing its ugly head, unfortunately. But Jack Miller will more than take this P2, I think. A very welcome return to the podium and a great performance all weekend from Jack Miller.
Yes, and I believe that this is something that his riding style produces, that he is apparently very, very heavy on the rear tire where they don't last as long. But it's okay, it's his style, but he did much better than in the past. So you can't really complain. I'm very happy for him. And Pecco, his teammate, he was a little bit underwhelming, much better than in the other races. But again, this isn't something he wants. He wants to race for victories, and didn't he? It was a bit underwhelming, and he finished in fifth. It's okay. It's his first points in the championship, or no? He scored like 1 point in Mandalika, but yeah, I guess. Or did he?
Yeah,
No, oh, I'm an idiot. I forgot his amazing race in Argentina where he came from the back. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, but he did he did okay, but considering that it's Pecco and he wants to fight for the title, it's a bit underwhelming.
yeah, it's been a very underwhelming start to Francesco Bagnaglia's season, to say the very least. I think what will irritate Bagnaia and Ducati more than finishing P5 is the fact that two inline four bikes finished ahead of him. Of course, Alex Rins and Joan Mir of Suzuki, who I'm sure we'll get on to in a minute, but both had a very good weekend. And yeah, Pecco would really have been hoping to be in the podium. Ducati locked out the first 5 places on the grid, of course. And yeah, he will have expected to have been on the podium. However, P5 is anything but the end of the world. It's some solid points on the board, like you just said. And I think for Bagnaia, it's a much more steady return to form, albeit not what he would have wanted, because obviously he's used to winning races now. But I think for the moment, he'll take the P5. He'll move on to, we're going to Portugal next, I believe, a track he performs very, very well at. So I think he'll take the P5. He'll sort of lick his wounds from finishing 5th behind 2 Suzukis. And I think he'll move on from it.
Yes. Sorry, I have something to eat right here and I couldn't resist.
Let's go.
Yeah, moving on with the Ducatis, Zarco and Martin, they had a good start to the race, but they were both fading to the end. I don't know the exact issue, what's there. But Zarco had a tough moment with Fabio, and we will get to Fabio in a second, but I can totally understand how he had to lunge up there to kind of destroy Zarco's momentum. But we will discuss this later. It's yeah, it's not the year of the GP22 because they did good in the qualifying. They did good at the beginning of the race, but they weren't able to hold up the pace. And as far as I'm concerned, they're having the 22 engine and the 22 chassis, while Pecco and Jack are running the 21 engine. So yeah, the same old story. We have to question if 8 bikes is too much to manage or not, because 8 bikes is a lot.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is an issue me and you both discussed in depth on the last episode of the show, and I think this is going to be a real problem for Ducati throughout the entirety of this season. Realistically, we have riders A, B, C, and D, the 2 factory riders, 2 riders in Pramac. In any one weekend, we could have A and C being first and second, and B and D being ninth and 10th, and then B and A, C and D, A and D, B and C. The combos are going to keep changing because we've got 8 riders who are using like 6 different formulas for 8 bikes. It's impossible for Ducati to keep up with all of this. I don't even necessarily well, to be honest with you, I don't know who to blame, but there's too many bikes that Ducati are trying to manage. And, when you lock out a third of the grid as one manufacturer, you are taking on an enormous amount of responsibility. And I think Pramac are really feeling it this year. I mean, don't get me wrong, Jorge Martin's been incredible, but there are going to be these races where Martin and Zarco are brilliant all
It's a good
weekend.
name for both.
Yeah, Marco, we just created a thing. Ladies and gentlemen, hashtag Marco for Pramac. You heard it here first. My point is, Martin and Zarco are going to have these weekends where they're absolutely unstoppable one weekend, and then they're at the bottom of the top 10 another. And that's just because they're using these different configurations. And it's impossible to iron out all these issues within one Friday and one Saturday, because they're trying to adapt to different tracks, different parts, everything you said pretty much last week, I think it was. In terms of analyzing the actual race, because that is at the end of the day what we're here to talk about, Jorge Martin had a flyer of the start of the race. Him and Jack Miller were duking it out at the front for at least the first third of the race. Martin started dropping back in the order. Obviously, other riders just got more momentum, got past him. Fabio did brilliantly to finish ahead of both of them. I got to give him a lot of credit for that. Zarco just faded quite quickly and managed to hang on. Don't get me wrong, there's nothing bad in that. finishing P9 he will take, because he hasn't had a great start to the season either, in my opinion. But yeah, Pramac definitely would have hoped to have done better because they qualified really well this weekend, and to finish P8 and P9 will be tough for them.
Yes, and they're basically the factory team, as I mentioned earlier. They're running the 22 bike, so yeah, it's kind of strange what's going on with Ducati, but what's not strange, what is really, really awesome to see, is that Suzuki, they're coming into their own. And like we discussed in previous episodes, they aren't bad by no means, but they aren't spectacular either. Alex Rins, yesterday he was spectacular because he was overtaking a lot of Ducatis. And I had a little bit of flashbacks to last year because I thought, man, he has to be so aggressive through the corners, especially overtaking in the hairpin, and he's getting overtaken again and again on the straight, that he might throw this thing away. That was a real concern I had, but he didn't. He prevailed and finished in an amazing second position. Same old story. They need to qualify better, and they had a little bit of a poor start with being 8th and 9th in the first lap, but this aside, they had an amazing race. Not spectacular from Joan Mir, but a decent 4th position. And yeah, he is being more of a podium contender than I anticipated. And Alex Rins is certainly a title contender now, because if he is consistent, and he's consistently the better Suzuki, he has the potential to win the thing.
Ladies and gentlemen, Alex Bins is no longer Alex Bins. He is very much Alex Rins who keeps it on the track. Like you said, brilliant weekend for Suzuki. Really, really impressive. It's like we talked about this at length in the last show regarding Dario Hondo in Argentina. That sacrifice that Suzuki have made for that, I think it's the front ride height device, isn't it? That sacrifice they've made on that bike is paying dividends. I mean, we've seen a Suzuki on the podium, I think 2 weekends in a row now. I think Rins was on the podium in Argentina as well, if I'm not wrong. And now he's been on the podium in Coda as well. I mean, Alex Rins is riding like a scalded cat. He's doing a brilliant, brilliant job. And like you said, the amount of Ducati overtakes he had was incredible. It really, really was. Alex Rins' nickname, to paraphrase the great Kazushi Sakuraba, should be the Ducati killer, because he is overtaking Ducatis on the straight in a way that nobody should be able to. It's brilliant to see. And I am really happy for Alex Rins, because he's a great guy. He's an even better rider. And he could be a title challenger. He really, really could be. As for Joan Mir, I think you hit the nail on the head, Leo. Unspectacular, but still got a really solid 4th place. It will be forgettable. I don't think it's the most memorable P4 we've ever seen, but an incredibly solid result nonetheless. My only issue with Suzuki is the exact same issue that you have, in that their qualifying needs to be a lot better. Qualifying towards the bottom of the top 10, if that was a Yamaha, God forbid, or any other bike, they'd have been completely in the midst. They'd be completely in the wilderness. But Suzuki have done something to that bike where they're able to qualify at the bottom of the top 10, around the 3rd, 4th row, and they're still getting near the podium. So whatever they are doing, they need to keep doing, because they are doing an unbelievable job so far. And credit to Alex Rins too.
Yes, and if Suzuki can sort out the qualifying and be a little bit more like Fabio was last year, qualifying on the first row, have a good first lap, then the race pace will take care of anything else, because towards the end of the race, I've been a little bit critical there, but they're better than I anticipated there as well, because okay, they overtook Jack Miller and the other Ducatis, which were a little bit fading, but nevertheless they did it and weren't fading. So I'm happy, and the development of the engine, even maybe it took away a little bit of the other strength they had. Could be, I don't know. I've never ridden one. I would like to, though. It pays
Suzuki, if
dividends
you're
because
watching this.
it pays dividends because imagine you're Fabio. You would never, ever, ever overtake a Ducati into the hairpin. Never. But Alex Rins thought, okay, if I can nail the exit, maybe I have a shot. That's all he needs. And he wasn't too bad on the straight. It was okay. And Coda is kind of an exceptional race because you're pretty much having a standing start to the back straight, and then you're coming pretty much to a stand at the corner. But they're doing really good, and I'm happy for Suzuki. And if I'm Fabio, I'm fucking looking at this bike.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The question you now have to ask yourself is, if Suzuki wanted Fabio Quartararo, which rider do you get rid of? Because you've got Joan Mir, who would seem to be the obvious choice, but he's won a world title. Then you have Alex Rins, who's on red hot form. Do you really want to destabilize that? I think Suzuki could have some very tough decisions to make in the not too distant future.
Yes, but maybe there's the speculation of Joan Mir going to Honda.
Oh, that's true. That is true.
Maybe the problem will take care of itself, but I'm looking forward to the silly season episodes in the summer break because
Oh yeah,
this will be fun speculating. Speaking of Honda, you have to give it up to Marc Marquez. First of all, the greatest respect I can give for dealing with this injury, coming back and having this performance, period. He finished in 6th position, and last week, if you told him, okay, you will finish 6th in Coda, he would have taken it, I believe. And man, he had a bad start. I don't know what happened there. It seemed to be a technical issue. It was a technical issue. He stated that, but I don't know which one. But he had an amazing recovery, and he could have easily won the Grand Prix with a good start. And I'm happy for him, first of all, that he's back because MotoGP is better. All the people accusing me of being a Marcus hater, I don't know, because I thought the criticism in Indonesia was valid, but apparently some people have other opinions. I don't want to talk about it too much because I don't care, playing it simple. But I'm happy he is back, and he is very, 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 very dangerous.
Yeah, look, it is no secret by any stretch of anybody's imagination that I am not Marc Marquez's president of his fan club, but god damn, what a fantastic race from Marquez. That was one of the great individual performances in the last few seasons. I have no problem admitting that because that was magnificent from Marquez. It truly, truly was. I did see the start. I thought he'd actually stalled his bike. That's what I thought had happened. Obviously, it didn't because he moved off at about 30 miles per hour. So it was definitely a technical issue, something to do with Honda's launch control, I think it was. But it was such a terrible start. And by the end of by the start of the first lap, he was in 24th. You know, he was rock bottom at the back of the grid. And like 3 laps later, I think he was 10 places ahead, or he was up to 15th or something like that. He'd overtaken a third of the grid anyway, is what I'm trying to say. And I gotta admit, that was so impressive from Marc Marquez. I mean, don't get me wrong, with his injury, he likes a left-handed track. Nobody's going to argue that. But that was so impressive from Marc. I really have to take my hat off to him because with that injury, with diplopia, and with the other things he's suffering from, that was just a hell of a ride from Marc Marquez. And like you said, Leo, you're absolutely correct. If you had told Marc before this weekend that he would finish in P6 at Austin, he, no pun intended, he would have taken your arm off for it, because that is just a great result for the injuries that he is currently carrying. So massive respect to Marc Marquez, one of the great individual rides of the last couple of seasons. And yeah, the championship is more spicy with him in it, there is no question.
Yes, And I have the pleasure of having the MotoGP video pass, and I watched his race through the onboard, and I can totally recommend it, especially like the first 10 lap. It was absolutely nuts. He overtook Raul Fernandez on the outside of the S's. He was hammering the thing into the corners. He was so aggressive on the brakes, and there was a moment where Brad Binder wanted to overtake somebody. I forgot who it was, and he pulled back because he thought, okay, maybe I haven't the front end stability to dive into the corner. So Marcus dived into and overtook Brad Binder, and this pretty much he did to everybody. He was so strong on the brakes, and considering that the new Honda is apparently not a bike which is as front heavy as the old one was, this is even more impressive. And he was all risk again. He had a big wobble, could have gone wrong, but it didn't. And that's his style. Love it or hate it. I would have been a little bit more cautious with his injury, which is pretty much my critique point of him in Indonesia. But he was so aggressive. And what kind of surprised me after the race, during the stint where I watched the race during with his onboard, he on the outlap there was this onboard camera pointing at him, which what I wanted to say, and he seems to be pissed. He seems to be pissed off or completely tired. I don't know, but it seemed to me like he had the feeling, oh shit, I could have won the thing. Because he was overtaking dudes while riding the pace that the front guys were doing.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I think it was probably a mixture of being pissed off and exhausted. Obviously, the physical toll that it's taking on Mark's body is otherworldly. Make no mistake about it. But there's also no doubt that Mark is thinking if he'd have got the same start everybody else had gotten, he could definitely have been on the podium this weekend at the very least. I definitely don't think there's any issues in saying that that is the case. Yeah, I mean, like you said, he was running the same pace as the people at the front were running. If there was less traffic in front, there's a real possibility Mark could even have gone on to win it. But we have to deal with what we have to deal with. Mark can only play with the cards he's got right now. And P6 in Austin, with everything he's suffering with, I think secretly he will be happy with that, because if it had been 2019 Marquez, I have to admit, I think he would have blown everyone else away.
Yes, of course. And which is evident to me now that Honda still needs Marquez, period. Because the last couple of races, Paul seemed to be a very good rider for Honda. He was nowhere to be found. Like every other Honda rider, there was nobody who did something good. Alex Marquez had a moment in the first lap where he almost high-sided, and he helped out Mark where he pushed a rider a little bit wide, and Mark took the gap and overtook both, I believe. And yeah, then he crashed, and Takaka Nakagami, he had a good start, but was fading and dropping back. So Honda, if you take out Mark Marquez, is completely lost, and they need to do something. If it's John Mir, if it's maybe Pedro Acosta, I don't know, but they need Mark Marquez. If Mark Marquez, for some reason, retires at the end of the season, they are fucked.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I mean, look at 2020. You know, without Mark Marquez, Honda were literally nowhere. And again, I mean no disrespect to the guy because he's an amazing rider, but Stefan Bradl is nowhere near Mark Marquez. Alex
No, of
Marquez
course
is not
not.
a Alex Marquez is not a patch in Mark Marquez. Takaki Nakagami isn't in the same universe as Mark Marquez. Paulo Spargaro is a level below Mark Marquez. The thing is, love him, hate him, be completely indifferent to him, you know, whatever preference it is yourself. The fact is, Mark Marquez is the ultimate X factor for Honda. He makes that bike work. When he's on full form, there is nobody who can do what Mark Marquez does. I don't necessarily like him. I do still think he's dangerous and he's reckless and he's aggressive and so on and so forth. But as a talent, he is once in a generation. He is that very rare breed of rider who you could have given Mark Marquez a Moto 2 bike, and if he's fully fit, he'll still finish ahead of most of the grid. He just is a special breed of rider, and I'm not by I'm not a, I'm unbiased enough to admit greatness when I see it, and Mark Marquez is that. But the point that you made, Leo, I absolutely agree with. Without Mark Marquez, Honda are well, truly, and profoundly fucked without him.
Yes. And there's something about him that he makes things work. The Honda now seemingly isn't his choice of bike because the old one was developed in a different direction. He still makes it work better than everybody else. And if we're being honest here, there are maybe 5 riders in the history of MotoGP who aren't a level below Marc Marquez at his top.
Oh,
An
yeah.
injured Marc Marquez is still a top 5 rider on the grid.
Well, the results literally prove that. You're absolutely correct.
Yeah. I mean, last year at the end of the season, he was still fighting for victories. He was fighting with Pecco and Jack Miller in Misano. He had them on their heels in Texas, and he is simply that good. If you like him or not, that's a different story, but he is one of the greatest riders who ever lived. And he proved that today. And it was spectacular to watch. I enjoyed very, very much to see him cut through the field like a hot knife cuts through butter. There's one thing that I wanted to point out. We talked about the UFC. And for everybody who watched, Hamza Chimaev broke into the top 5, and it was a different fight for him. And the same in MotoGP. At the beginning, on the back of the grid, he overtook them left and right. But the more he came into the points and into the top 10, the more difficulties he had to overtake riders. And that is one reason maybe that he used up his rear tire. Could be, I don't know. But the other one is the air is getting thinner the further you go up there. And he had not troubles, but it wasn't as easy. And all the people saying, oh my God, the MotoGP field is competitive from top to bottom. No, it's not. Is the last one exceptionally good? Yes. But there is a big difference between the riders in the last 5 places and the riders in the top 5 places.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, you just used the perfect metaphor there, or the perfect analogy, I should say. The further you go up the MotoGP grid, it becomes more and more and more rarefied air. And because we probably have the most competitive grid we've ever had, we're seeing that now more than ever. I mean, this is not a grid that has, and again, I mean no disrespect to these riders. They're better riders than I probably ever will be. But
Not
this
probably, fact.
brutal but true, not wrong. The point is, this MotoGP grid does not have Randy DePugnes and Carol Abrahams and Tito Rabats anymore, so it is more competitive than it was, say, 4 or 5 years ago. The problem is that a 50% Mark Marquez is still better than most of them. And that speaks, I don't think that speaks to necessarily how bad the competitive riders are. I do think it speaks to how truly great Mark Marquez is, and that is to his credit. But you make a very, very interesting point, and I'm glad you did. The further he got up towards the top 6, because he obviously finished 6th, so he was in the top 6. The further he got up, the harder it was to overtake and the more effort it took. Whereas in 2018, 2019, he probably would have gone on to win that race quite comfortably. The point is, it's easy taking over the Darren Binders and the Brad Binders and probably the Alicia Spargos and the Zargos and so on and so forth. But getting past and staying past the Quartararos, the Banyayas, the Jorge Martins, that is going to become more and more difficult as this season goes on, because these riders are getting more experience and they're getting better and they're getting stronger on their bikes as every race goes on. So this season will truly be a test of Marc Marquez and whether it can get any easier to level up the grid the further it goes on. That's something I'm very much looking forward to seeing as this season progresses. So I'm glad you bring that up.
Yes, and Fabio was the only rider who overtook Marc Marquez, even though it was just briefly. But at a moment, Marc Marquez was in front of him, and the next moment, Fabio was in front of him, and then Marc overtook him back. But the point I'm making, Fabio is the only one who overtook him yesterday, and he is maximizing. And I can't
Oh,
stress this enough how much he is maximizing the potential of the Yamaha. It's the same old story. The other bikes, they fly by. For example, Mark, he flew by him. Mark flew by nobody on the grid because everybody has great straight line speed except the Yamaha. He was blasting past this thing, and you gotta feel bad for him because he is so aggressive on the brakes. He is a motherfucker on the brakes. There was a moment, I believe, Jean Zarco. It was for sure a Pramac Ducati. I believe it was Jean Zarco. He overtook him on the straight, and Fabio overtook him back into the corner. And he was so aggressive. And I can't blame him because he has to. This bike is so shitty. We had our Yamaha run last week after Argentina. This bike is so shitty that he has to make moves like he did to Zarco. Is it fair? Maybe not, but can you blame him? No. The Yamaha engineers are to blame.
yeah, I mean, Fabio Quartararo with every race reminds me of Valentino Rossi with his late braking, not only because he's so good at it, but because of how much he has to do it. I mean, Jesus Christ Almighty, that M1 is awful. It's terrible to watch. It really, really is. And it's so obvious that 12-mile-an-hour gap in top speed. It's almost pitiful to watch at this point because you've got the world champion, the elite of the elite, the king of the mountain of motorcycle racing on a bike that's getting overtaken by every other bike in the grid. It's tragic. It really, really is. But I mean, it speaks to how incredible of a rider Fabio Quartararo is that even on such a barge, such a river barge, that he's still the only one who overtook Marc Marquez, however brief. I mean, Fabio deserves such a better team and such a better bike. It's not even funny. I mean, he was on the same bike last year and he still brought you a world title. The fact that that bike has not been improved, there is no defense for it. And the last nail in the coffin for Yamaha's would be defense is Suzuki's improvements in their bike. They've proven that an inline four can be improved to the point where it can go toe to toe with a V4. So someone needs to pull their finger out of their ass at Yamaha because Fabio is riding to the point of that bike breaking apart. He can't do any more with what he's got.
Yes. And to me, he is the best rider on the grid right now. His performance, even though the results don't show, is so impressive to me. I picked him as the biggest disappointment for this year, which wasn't a knock on him as a rider, but it was exactly this which I thought would happen, that the Yamaha is simply not good enough. And he deserves so much better. He is such a great rider, and I'm so impressed by his performance. He should be giving extra points or whatever. If Yamaha continues like this, maybe they get the concession points next year and can develop a good bike. Because when you look at Frankie, there was on the Marcus on what a brief stint where Frankie was in front of him. He didn't seem comfortable on the brakes at all. And that's pretty much the difference between Fabio and Frankie. I thought if a healthy Frankie would be better, but Frankie is apparently not confident, and Fabio is making up this gap that the Yamaha engineers burdened him with by his amazing riding style. He is so great on the brakes, he's great in the corners, and he's just phenomenal. I can't stress this enough. But if you have a good rider like Frankie, he's a very, very good rider. He's a world champion. He won races. If you have a good rider who is not on the level maybe as Fabio is, you see what happens. Andrea Dovizioso, by no means he's a bad rider. And those people are nowhere, nowhere. I'm getting
Yeah,
tired of ranting about Yamaha every week, but they are so fucking garbage. I don't know what are they doing.
yeah. I
Maverick
mean,
pointed this out. Valentino Rossi pointed this out. They need more straight line speed, and Suzuki proved it.
Yeah, this is not a brand new issue. This isn't something that we've just seen this season and gone, oh shit, the M1 is a trash bike compared to everything else. This issue has been going on since late 2017. Valentino Rossi kept going on about this week after week after week after week, season after season after season, until the man retired last year. Maverick Vinales went on about it until he left the Yamaha team. Leo, I would truly love to know what in the hell it's going to take for Yamaha to actually do something about this M1, because this can't continue. Yamaha are being left behind, and it's only the supernatural talents of Fabio Quartararo that are keeping them afloat right now. Because, tell you what, Fabio to Yamaha is what Marc Marquez is to Honda. That's the comparison that needs to be made here. He is the X factor for that bike, and he is somehow making it work. But trust me, Yamaha, and trust me, Massimo Marigali, and trust me, Lynn Jarvis, you are not going to be able to rely on Fabio Quartararo forever, because he will peace out for 2023 if that bike doesn't get better quick. Because right now it is going downhill quickly, quicker than the actual bike is. The bike's going downhill that quickly. Get it together.
Yes, and the difference between Marc Marquez and Fabio is that Marc Marquez actually had a bike which worked for him. Even though he bailed Honda out, he bailed him out with a bike which worked for him, and he was unbeatable on it. Fabio is bailing Yamaha not out, but as much as he can. That what you ask what it takes. First of all, if I'm Frankie, I'm heading the fuck out. If I'm Fabio, I'm heading the fuck out. Andrea Dovizioso and Darren Binder probably have no choice there. But if I'm Toprak and I'm seeing this, I'm staying in the World Superbike, because who the hell wants to deal with this shitty bike? And if those riders leave, they get maybe some concession points, which would be a little bit of it would be a little bit hilarious if Aprilia loses them and Yamaha gets them. But if I'm CEO, for example, of Yamaha, or I'm on the board there, I'm firing everybody in the motorsport department, because this is embarrassing.
Yeah,
how can you lose? Fabio Quartararo's riding style is tailor-made for a good Yamaha. He proved that last year. But how can you lose someone like this? It's when you have the hottest girlfriend in the world and she does everything for you, and you cheat on her. So yeah, you don't deserve better.
We're looking at you, Jay-Z.
Yeah.
How could you do this? No, you're absolutely right. It's a weird example, but it's the right one. In Fabio Quartararo, you have got the future of MotoGP, the face of MotoGP for the next decade, for the next generation, and you are about to throw it in the trash because you aren't willing to develop a proper bike for him to ride with. Like you said, last season proved an inline four is tailor made for Quartararo's riding style, but you cannot expect him to go out and do what he does with a 10, 12 mile per hour deficiency in top speed. It's absolutely ridiculous. And like you said, I agree with you fully in this, Leo. If I'm Franco Morbidelli, I'm piecing out from factory Yamaha. If I'm Fabio Quartararo, my bags are packed and I'm heading to Suzuki if I can make that happen, because they've actually got an inline four that works and is competing with V4 bikes. Fabio, it must be so frustrating to be Fabio Quartararo when it comes to a race and you're doing your thing and you're just seeing bike after bike after bike flying past you on a straight or a half decent corner as well. I'm lost for words for Yamaha, and I don't think I have many more to give for them.
Yes, and last year, who would have thought that Maverick made the right decision in going to Aprilia? Nobody thought this is a good move for Maverick, but he proved in Austin that he's on par with Aleix. Let me check. He was 10th and Aleix was 11th, so they're equal. Aleix won last week, And I believe that if Maverick can have a little bit more experience on the bike, he can be up there on a good weekend, maybe fighting for a podium, even a victory. And yeah, I'm impressed, first of all, by Maverick to closing the gap to Aleix. But all in all, it was kind of an average performance for Aprilia, I guess. Nothing spectacular, but nothing bad here. I mean, it was kind of obvious that they aren't championship contenders and winning every weekend, but they would have probably taken a single-digit result at the end for Aleix at least. But all in all, Maverick should be much happier than Aleix, but they had an average performance. They will be back, and life moves on.
Aprilia are the new Suzuki. Let's go.
Yeah,
That's
let's
all.
go.
That's all I can say. Aprilia have gone from winning the race last time out to 10th and 11th. Now, look, no bike is ever going to dominate every single grid. I understand that. All circuits are different to some degree. But you know what? 10th and 11th ain't the worst result. At least you're not KTM or Yamaha, let's be honest. So for Aprilia, is it the best result? No. Is it the worst situation to be in? Definitely not.
No, and let's not forget this. It's not a completely developed bike. It's kind of a
Exactly.
whole new thing for this year, and they're getting there. They're doing good progress. It takes weekend like these where maybe they aren't as good, but at least they didn't crash. Looking at you, Alex Marcus, and they had a good day. Nothing special, but nothing bad. So they will come to Europe and maybe be in the top 5 again, and maybe Maverick will be up there with Aleix, which is kind of the main point I'm trying to make here. That at least yesterday he closed the gap to Aleix. He finished in front of him, and look where he was last week or in Qatar. Or I don't want to really take Mandalika as a reference because it was a wet race. Strange things happen. For example, Miguel Oliveira won there. Where was Miguel Oliveira in the dry races? Nowhere. So the point I'm trying to make is Maverick closed the gap to Aleix, and that's impressive to me.
Yeah, it's very impressive. Maverick does deserve a lot of credit. He took a lot of ridicule and a lot of flack, neither from us, just legal disclaimer. We did not criticize Maverick Vinales going to Aprilia, but he
Maybe a
deserves a lot of
little bit.
credit. Yeah, maybe it's minute a little bit, but you didn't hear that from me. The point is he
And the
deserves
old
a lot.
account got banned, so there's no proof in there.
Yeah, and Maverick Vinales deserves a lot of credit. He's definitely looked in the last 2 races. He's looked like he's really gelling with that bike, so he deserves a lot of credit. Obviously, Aleix does his thing. Sometimes he's best rider on the grid. Sometimes he's towards the middle. But yeah, solid weekend for Aprilia.
Not solid was KDM. It was
Oh,
complete garbage. I mean, I would like to split KDM into the rookies. They did a good job. I mean, it's kind of strange this year because all rookies seem to be on the same level, condensed at the back of the grid, which speaks to MotoGP, how competitive this is and how difficult it is to learn. And yeah, the factory boys for KDM, they took a big dump. I mean, Brad Binder, he was 12th. At least he scored points. Where was Miguel? He was 18th. Great. And he finished with 32 seconds behind the leader. This is unacceptable. And what the hell is going on with him? And yeah, the rookies, they finished the race, which is the important part. They gained the experience, and the speed will catch up later. It's kind of surprising to me that Raul and Remy are on the same level. I thought it might be different. If I thought that Raul might have more up and down performances where he breaks into the top 10 and crashes out the next 2 races or is nowhere to be found, whatever. But he is pretty consistent, and Remy is as well. So this is more what I expected from Remy than from Raul, but they're both doing their job. They are learning. They're not crashing. They're not injuring themselves. I'm fine with the rookies, all of the rookies. And yeah, the factory boys, they need to do better, especially if Brad Binder wants to compete for the World Championship.
Yeah, Binder and Oliveira, bit of a trash weekend. Will not want to remember this, especially Miguel Oliveira. P18, 32 seconds behind the race leaders, nowhere near good enough. I expect that from Raul Fernandez and Remy Gardner. I don't expect it from Miguel Oliveira whatsoever. Brad Binder had a bit of a tough start to the championship, really. Had a couple of solid results, but has kind of been in the wilderness as well. He'll want to get it together as soon as possible. But Miguel Oliveira, that's a disaster for him. That is very, very, very poor, especially if you're a multiple time race winner. There is no excuse whatsoever. So, yeah, he's really got to get it together soon as. As for the rookies, can't add much more to what you said. You know, Raul Fernandez and Remy Gardner, they are where you'd expect them to be. They are where you'd expect any rookie to be. To be totally honest, if I was being totally critical, I would expect Raul Fernandez to at least be getting 1 or 2 points per race, because I think the likes of, when you look at the likes of Dovizioso, Marini, sort of around that territory, I'd expect Fernandez to be challenging up somewhere around there. But Remy, I have no issues with at all, because he is still recovering from a lot of injuries, very painful injuries, might I add. And so I think we will see the two R's get better as the season goes on. Raul will adapt to the bike better. Remy will heal up better, and I think I think, like you said, the pace will follow them. They can't chase the pace.
Yeah, that's actually something I should ask him, because now we get to a point where the injuries shouldn't bother him anymore. But I don't know how much they blocked his development. I don't know. But yeah, I will ask him how the injuries are affecting him. Maybe they're not affecting him at all. So yeah, so much for MotoGP. It felt kind of illegal to watch Moto3 after
Oh,
MotoGP on Sunday, but I would like to go down to Moto2, have the usual order here. And it was a crazy first half of the race, because all hell broke loose in the first lap and the championship contenders crashed. And Abolino, he prevailed. He was the last man standing. He did no mistake. In order to finish first, you have to finish first, except you're Izan Guevara. And I'm happy for him. I'm happy for Jake Dixon. I'm happy for Ayogura. They did they did solid weekend. Not the pace of Viedi and Canet, but Viedi and Canet crashed. So happy for him. Last man standing. It is what it is. Good job.
yeah, it is what it is. Tony Arbolino, great race. Like you said, and I couldn't agree more. To finish first, you've got to finish first. Took advantage of the situation. Took advantage of Vietti coming in a bit too hot to the S bend. Took himself out. Aaron Canet, very similar. Both unfortunate, but both will learn from them. Great race win, I should say, for Tony Arbolino. Was very patient. Like you said, last man standing deserves a lot of credit. Yeah, I want to move on a little bit to Cameron Bobier, because I know this is something you wanted to talk about as well. And I do
Yes.
agree. I do agree with your sentiments, because we talked a bit about this. Very weak first lap, got bullied around a lot. And then on the last corner, binned the P4. No real excuse for it. This is his second season in the championship. You should know how to finish the final two corners of the race. And yeah, very disappointing for the Americans in
Yes.
America.
He had like a good start, but it seemed like he was a little bit too cautious. And Viedi and Canet, they took full advantage of it. They flew by him, and there was a little bit of contact he had, which made him lose a couple of positions, but he was still in a good place, especially in hindsight that Viedi and Canet crashed out and Pedro crashed out. But he did some mistakes. He went wide after the back straight, and yeah, as you said, you have to finish the last two corners, especially in a position where he was, where it's unlikely that Schrotter will overtake him. And I don't really know how the crash went. I haven't seen the video, But yeah, this is unexcusable, and it seemed to be to me like a little bit that he was under immense pressure and was a little bit too cautious.
Yeah, I think with Cameron Bobier, because I saw a brief replay of his crash. I think he just took the front end going into the left to go into the final two turns. I think I don't think it was like a major crash or anything. It's just a massive disappointment that he let the front end slide out from under him. Pretty amateurish mistake, but we move on. It is what it is. And yeah, he had decent race pace. He was around sixth for most of the race. But to not finish the race from P4 with Marcel Schroeder behind you, that will be gutting.
Yes, and talking about Marcel Schroeder, he had a crazy first corner, to being nicely, where he dive bombed into everybody, and I believe Augusto Fernandez was sent down the grid. I don't really remember. It was just a red-orange bike, could be Albert Arenas. I don't know. But the point I'm making, he was completely reckless, almost unexcusable how you can go into a first corner like this. This is an accident waiting to happen. It's a wonder that nobody crashed out there. And also Chandra, what the hell was he doing?
That was rough. That was
Because
bad.
I would expect, talking from the outside, it's easy to criticize. It's I don't know how he judged the situation in this moment, but I would like a rider who is too late on the brakes not to take the inside line, rather than take the outside line, deal with your mistake, go wide. There is a huge asphalt area where you can turn and return safely. Sam Lowe's race was completely destroyed. All the carnage behind, you don't know how this was affected by the crash, where Fermin Aldeguer, I believe, went into the back of somebody. And this is unexcusable. I would like to see a penalty there and just take the outside line, or you don't belong to the championship. That simple. He is an
Couldn't
amazing
agree.
rider. He proved that the last two races, but this was a rookie mistake. This seemed like he panicked.
Yeah, could not agree more, Leo. I think you've just hit the nail on the head. Definitely needs to be a penalty for this, because I'm sorry, Somkhat Chantra, there's no excuse for coming in that hot. And if you do look, coming in that hot, I guess, can happen to people. You can get caught up in the race. You can be worried about people behind you, and then shit, you're at the corner where you have to brake. So I do understand that, but you cannot come in that hot, cut across the racing line, and pray that people will move out of the way. That was Sam Lowe's line. He was in nobody's way. He was on his way around. You completely smashed into his back tire. And like you said, Leo, you completely destroyed his race. So there needs to be a severe penalty for that in the next race, because that was beyond inexcusable. Marcel Schroeder's is not great, but I can sort of see it. You know, you're coming up to a long sweeping bend at that first turn after the start. I can kind of see why you'd come in a little bit hot, but that turn where Chantra wiped out Sam Lowe's, there is no excuse for that, and there's no excuse I'll accept, period. Fermin Aldeguer gets given out. Sorry?
I'm sorry to interrupt you there, but there's one point. The only excuse that could be is that there was a backwind on the straight and maybe he misjudged the braking point, but that doesn't explain how he turned inside and not outside.
Exactly.
That's the only explanation that I have.
Yeah, even if you do want to defend that, which is entirely your right if you want to defend it, like Leo just said, you've got to take the outside line in that, take the asphalt, get back into the race. Chantra had the pace to work his way through the grid. He did not need to, this wasn't a last lap. He did not need to dive bomb the way he did. It was reckless, it was stupid, and 5 riders were eliminated because of his moment of madness. So it was a very, very poor lapse of judgment from Chantra. That being said, credit to his teammate Iagora, a brilliant, brilliant race. thankfully, even despite Chanter's madness, Honda Team Asia are still going very strong. I believe he finished P2 ahead of Jake Dixon. I think he overtook him in the second to last lap. And Iagora had a brilliant race. He had a great pace all weekend. And credit to him, he looks like a man reborn, and he looks like a man who will really challenge for this Moto2 title.
If he can sort out his qualifying. That's the point again. It's the same with the Suzuki. It's the same like last time out. I mean, Vietti crashed, Canet crashed, Pedro crashed. You know, he got a little bit lucky there that these positions were gifted to him. So a second place is good. But there's a theory that I have that the grip levels in the Moto2 race were maybe not as the riders are used to because the Moto3 didn't race before. So there wasn't the rubber down from the Moto3 race, and maybe that's an explanation for all the crashes we saw in the first half of a race, because Vietti, he lost the bike mid-corner in this double right-hander. It seemed to me like he wanted to push to catch Canet, which is totally unnecessary in his position, with like 20 points of a lead in the championship at this point. Canet, big chattering at the front, seemed to be not really his fault, but I don't know. You gotta ask him that. It was strange because it was kind of the end of the corner and the bike started to vibrate and he lost the front there. Sad for him. The championship would have been really interesting with him and Vietti, because to me, those are the top two guys. And Pedro, he overcooked the front into the S's, which resulted in a very dangerous situation where he was sliding back over the track and Iagura had to move out of the way. Not great. You don't want to see this, and this questions a little bit the layout, because with a motorcycle these things can happen. But yeah, lucky that nothing happened, but those crashes were a little bit strange to see, especially from these guys.
Yeah, I actually like your theory about the Moto2 crashes being caused because there was no Moto3 beforehand. I do agree with that, and I think there is some traction to that, no pun intended. But yeah, I mean, Celestino Vietti's was mid-flow, Aaron Cannett's was mid-flow, and to Aaron Cannett's immense credit, he nearly saved it. I think if there was some more grip on that corner, he arguably could have gotten it back up. Again, there's no point in debating physics because it happened, we move on. But those two were very unfortunate, and it just was what it was. But Pedro Acosta is so lucky nothing happened. I'm actually really thankful he's okay. I mean, look, it was through the S's. It can happen to anybody. But to come back over the track like that, and thank God Iagora got past him, because that very easily could have gone awfully wrong. I'm just, honestly, I don't even care that Pedro Acosta crashed out. I'm just glad that he's all right. And I'm glad that he didn't get hit and that another tragic fatality did not befall MotoGP. So look, crashes were unfortunate. They suck. We want to see everybody try and stay on their bike as much as we can. But at the end of the day, thankfully, everybody was okay at the end of it.
Yes. And I hate to talk about this, but this is how people die.
Yeah, it is.
People don't usually die from high sides or whatever. They die because they get run over. And if you have a layout, which I don't want to say welcomes this stuff, but you know what I mean?
Attracts it.
Yeah, it's difficult, but how do you solve this problem? If you have those kind of S's, you have these kind of problems. Maybe a gravel there would prevent it, but maybe a gravel would have been worse. I don't know. But yeah, it's very, 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 very lucky that he wasn't run over there. He had a terrible situation last year in Assen where he was run over by Riccardo Rossi, I believe. And it's totally different if a Moto2 bike runs you over, which is 2 times more heavy than a Moto3 bike. You know, there's a different force hitting you. as we were about to debate physics. Yeah, but no point in discussing this more, because luckily nothing happened and we move on. I'm totally fine with Pedro's performance in the first couple of races. He's a rookie. Let it happen. I mean, he will be strong in Portimao. He will be strong in Jerez. And I'm this close to calling this a fact because he was so good in the tests. And he's good in those tracks, period, because he has experience there, yada, yada, yada. Enough for Moto2. Let's head to Moto3, because we had the 10-year anniversary of Moto3, which was great to see, because the class in itself, I have to give Dorna credit for us. The class is entertaining, and since 2014-15, where Honda joined and everybody pretty much got the same bike, it's nothing but spectacular. And Masia got a much needed win. I'm very, very happy for him. And he had a very, very strong performance. Especially his last lap was super gangster.
Yeah, Jaume Masia had a great race. He really did. It's not fair to say that he had a bad start, because in Moto3, pretty much everybody gets the same start, regardless of where you actually qualify. So credit to Jaume Masia. He stayed in the mix long enough to obviously take advantage. Obviously, some absolute madness happened, which we'll get onto in a minute. But he managed to stay in the mix, had a really, really good solid race, banged out lap after lap after lap, and he took advantage. And like you said, it was a much, much needed win for Jaume Masia, and an even more much needed win for KTM as well.
Yes, and Minio and Foggia also, they showed their experience. They were at the back of the leading group at the beginning, and got to the front when all the chaos started to calm down a little bit. And as soon as they hit the pace at the front, it was getting quieter, at least a little bit. And yeah, they showed their experience. Happy for him. A little bit sad that Minio didn't win the race, because I thought it would be great for him. And obviously, as a Valentino Rossi fan, you like to see the Academy riders win. But yeah, they did very, very good. I guess the main talking point here is, first of all, Dennis Öncü, and second of all, Daniel Olgado. We will come to him later. But yeah, there's this situation that occurred in 2011 or 12, where Valentino Rossi crashed into Casey Stoner. And Casey Stoner said to him, maybe your ambition overweight your talent, which in this instant was maybe a bit disrespectful and not correct. But if you take this one to Dennis Öncü, not in a negative way, but he was very, very ambitious, but he hadn't had the pace. We saw that at the end of the race when Minio, Foggia, and Masia made the pace. He fell behind, but he was very aggressive. He wanted to be there. He has this willpower that when he sees a gap, he goes in there. There were some situations that could have gone wrong, but they didn't. So hey, everything's fine. And yeah, he was lacking the speed at the end, like Artigas did, like Diogo Moreira did. He crashed out. So a lot to learn for him, but it's great. First of all, I have to give a shout out to Dennis Öncü, that he is more grown up now, and takes memes as what they are, memes, and not as an insult. So shout out to him. I like to see the development there, character development at its finest. But yeah, he was good, but he was lacking a little bit of the speed at the end, which is fine.
Yeah, Dennis Öncü is one of the craziest Moto3 riders I've ever seen. I mean, Diogo Moreira had such a fantastic start to the race, and Dennis Öncü just counted on bullying him out of it by the end of the first lap. It was absolutely madness to see. I mean, he banged into the side of Diogo Moreira and then had the guts to blame him for it. Shout out Dennis Öncü, because that was just both insane and impressive. But yeah, very, very good race. I think Dennis Onchu lost a lot of his pace towards the end because he counted on leading by the end of the first 2 or 3 laps. And I think when that didn't happen, it started to fall a little bit for him. Don't get me wrong, he deserved a lot of credit for staying in that pack and finishing where he did. But I think he counted on having a strong lead at the start of the race in order to try and get the win. Because generally, when he starts towards the front, he does finish really strong. Daniel Holgado deserves a big shout out as well. Had a very good race. Diogo Moreira, got to give him the biggest shout out though. He had a fantastic race until unfortunately he did crash out. But for a rookie, Diogo Moreira has been so impressive, has he not? He's been better than even I thought he would, and I thought he would do really, really well. I mean, Dennis Onchu, it's kind of weird calling Onchu a veteran because he's still really young, but he's more of a veteran in this class than someone like Diogo Moreira. And Moreira can hold his own. He really, really can. And he deserves so much credit. And I'm sure he will get it after this race.
Yes. But you have to explain to me how Daniel Holgado had a great race.
How do I think he had a great race? Well, I think okay, maybe great is a little bit strong, don't get me wrong. I think he had a decent weekend. I think he was showing relatively solid pace. I think he was showing decent enough pace at the start of the race, and unfortunately, it didn't quite come together. But I believe in Danny Holgado. I think he will come a lot better towards the end of the season. Actually, you know what? I will take my point back. I don't think he had a great race, but I think he had great moments in the race in very small flashes. And I think he showed in very small flashes, especially in the first lap or two, what he will bring towards the end of the season. So for me, Danny Holgado will come good, but races like this will teach him the way for remaining years.
Yes, there's no point in debating his talent because it's evident. He is one of the most talented riders on the grid, but he was all over the place. In the first lap, he had a very, very big moment with Andrea Migno, or maybe the second lap, I don't remember, at the beginning of the race. And he launched an overtake which costed Migno like 2 or 3 places. He took Garcia out. You can argue racing incident, but I would like him to be a little bit more caution there, because in the World Championship, I know you want to prove that you belong there, and nobody's debating that, but he seemed to be a little bit overly aggressive yesterday, and he seemed to be a little bit like he wanted it too much to prove, I want to be at the front. I want to show everybody that I'm as good as Moreira or better, or like Pedro. You don't know what's going on inside his head, but it seemed to me like he was a little bit over his talent or his pace at the moment. And the incident with Toba at the end, I haven't seen this one either. I just saw them laying in the last corner. But having those moments where it was evident he was too aggressive, then having the incident with Garcia, having the incident with Toba. Yes, he's a rookie, he will learn, but it's kind of unnecessary because Sergio Garcia, he is suffering from this mistake because he is now like 15 or 20 points down in the championship.
Yeah, I agree with you actually. I think with Danny Holgado, we see a sort of a pit bull type approach that we see from Dennis Onchu, and that he has this obsession to prove that he belongs at the front and that he should be the best and he should be this and he should be that. The difference is that Dennis Onchu has more experience in this class, and he can take more of a bullish approach because he knows how to handle the bike and he knows how to handle the situation. Danny Holgado does not, because he's a rookie in this class and he needs to earn more race time before he can go doing what you said. And like you said, you're absolutely right. I mean, the championship leader, Sergio Garcia, he's now 15, 20 points down because the rookie tried to prove a point. And that incident towards the end with Kaido Toba, I caught a glimpse of it, and I think Holgado was at fault for that as well. I could be wrong, but I think it was Danny Holgado who was at fault for it. So yeah, I totally agree. These experiences will ultimately build his character and make him a better rider. but he does have to be more considerate. You're absolutely not wrong in that at all.
It's 16 point. I just checked.
Oh, right.
Yeah. There's one thing I would like to discuss, which was the Guevara jump start. I mean, you see on the replay that the bike moves a little bit, but to me, this is not a jump start because you don't know what's up with the clutch. It's a tense situation, but he didn't gain any advantage. He was moving, yes, but inside the starting box and or the starting area, whatever you want to call it. He was moving there, yes, but he didn't gain any advantage at all. So I think it was a little bit harsh to penalize him, but the rules are the rules. And where exactly do you draw the line between he was getting an advantage or no advantage? So I can live with the penalty, but in this instance, I thought it was a little bit unnecessary.
Yeah, I'm glad you bring this up because I actually agree with you when it comes to Izan Guevara's jump start. I thought it was harsh as well. I did manage to see the replay of it. And if you look at the white paint mark that obviously marks out where your front tire is meant to be at the start of the race, I actually don't think Izan Guevara's front tire went outside of that white paint mark. So for the FIM to give him a long lap penalty for that, or was it a double long lap penalty?
It was a double.
It was, I mean, even if it was just one long lap penalty, fair enough, I can understand that. But to give him a long lap double penalty for like half an inch starting, I think that's brutally unfair. I really do. And the reason I think is because of the reason you just mentioned. He didn't gain anything from it. It's not like Izan Guevara shot to the front of the race and stayed there and went on to win. If he'd have done that, then fair enough, you'd have no argument. But Izan Guevara didn't gain anything from it. He moved this much and he stayed in exactly the same place. Come on, do we really need to punish that? I don't think so. Personally, I thought it was too tedious. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, which brings me to the point where exactly is the line. I mean, yes, advantage, I get that, but what exactly is an advantage? And if you allow a rider to have this before a start, where's the line what you don't allow to a rider, which as the race direction from their perspective is difficult to judge, first of all, from the outside. And second of all, it's easier for them to say, okay, if you move double long lap, and he's lucky that he didn't get a ride through like back in the days. So even though I don't agree with the penalty, because in this instance, I thought it's unnecessary, I would say that in general speaking, I understand where they are coming from. So yeah, not too much criticism from my part here. The rookies again were good. We talked a bit about Mojera, we talked about Olgado. They showed pace, and Ivan Otola did too. So I want to give a quick shout out to them before we head to the end. And as the last segment, I would like to ask you for the meme of the week.
Ladies and gentlemen, meme of the week, one of my favorite segments of this show. First of all, I'd like to give a very quick shout out to Scott Ogden. Thought he did amazingly finishing P12, actually. Showed a lot of maturity, had a great race. Just quick shout out to him. But meme of the week for me has got to be, I will actually see if I can find it. I should be able to. Bear with me. Yes, and no surprise, it features Deniz Oncu, our new favorite rider. And it is
the Turkish terrorist.
Turkish terrorist Deniz Oncu unseen on board. One of the greatest memes you will ever see. And the fact that the man himself laughed at it tells you why it's meme of the week. So for me, meme of the week, Turkish terrorist Deniz Oncu.
Yeah, I'm waiting for him to have the Turkish terrorist printed on his ass on the leathers. But yeah, it's nice to see that he laughed about it. Didn't we want to split the segment into MotoGP, Moto2, and Moto3? I can't remember. Didn't we want to do this?
Did we? Yeah. I mean, I guess.
Fuck it. Fuck it. Yeah. We can do it next week. Next week is Portimao, right?
In fact, you know what? I'll actually make a rough start at doing it now because I don't even care. For
Okay.
MotoGP, it is this one, Eric Andre, Fabio Quartararo let me in. He forgot his paddock pass and he's the world champion. It kind of has to work.
How can
As
you
for,
forget your paddock pass? I mean,
I mean, there's no excuse for that. As for Moto 2, Celestino Vietti's championship lead, piecing out, and it's back again. Can't beat it. And as for Moto 3, it is, of course, the Turkish terrorist Dennis Onchu. There we are, ladies and gentlemen. MotoGP 2 and 3 memes of the week. Great
thank
work
you
by
very
Leo, as
much.
always.
Thank you very much. That brings us to the end. Coda was an amazing weekend. Usually boring races in MotoGP because Marquez is leading by 15 seconds. But this week it's good. Maybe we should handicap him in the upcoming years at Coda. But I just checked. We have the next race in 2 weeks in Portimao at on the 24th of April. So we will see each other in 2 weeks. I had a blast. Great weekend. So see you and goodbye.